Do you have giants to face today? Well, here's a word of encouragement. God specializes in delivering his children from giants. That's what we see in our Bible story today. We see the Israelites camped out beside a valley facing the Philistines. And every day this giant would come out from the Philistine ranks and yell and scream, trying to scare the Israelites. In fact, he did it for 40 days. And finally, the Israelite army trembled. Why? Because they were afraid of this big, bad guy named Goliath. He was a Philistine. He was a warrior. He was over 9 feet tall. He was protected by bronze armor. And so the Israelite soldiers couldn't do a thing about him. They were afraid. But there was a young man who wasn't afraid. His name was David. Let me introduce him. David was just a young shepherd. He was hanging out with his dad, Jesse, and he heard the giant yelling and screaming and challenging Israel. So he said, "Hey, Dad, let me go into the battle. Let me go fight this giant." But Jesse said, "No, stay here, son. Watch the camp. I'm sending you some food." You see, David's dad was a man of 8 years' experience in the service of the Lord, and he knew the Lord would take care of the problem. But apparently, David didn't get that memo because he said, "Hey, God will deliver his people. I can help." But Jesse said, "No, stay here, son, and watch the camp." And then David took food to his older brothers, the men who were fighting in the war. But when he got there, he found out they were discouraged. So he asked them why they weren't going out to fight the giants, and they said, "We're afraid. We're afraid of that big, bad guy." Then David said something really interesting. He said, "Whoever kills this Philistine and takes his helmet and his armor, I will give them to you." Now, that's amazing. This young shepherd boy was willing to risk his life to slay a giant. That shows us obedience in the small things leads to great callings. You see, Jesse told David to take food to his brothers. It was a small task, but David didn't shrink back. He obeyed, and then God used him in an extraordinary way. David ended up killing the giant and taking the giant's S helmet and the giant's S armor and giving them to one of his brothers, whose name was Eliab. Now, while David was talking with his brothers, someone came running over. He was a man of the tribe of Benjamin, and he said to David, "Hey, listen, the king has commanded that if anybody kills that Philistine, he will receive a reward, much more than just the armor. He will receive riches and his daughter's hand in marriage." Wow, talk about a promotion. So then David went to King Saul and said, "Your Majesty, please let me go fight that Philistine." But Saul said to him, "You cannot fight that giant. I've tried to kill him, but he's too strong for me." So once again, David was overlooked, not because he lacked courage, but because he looked like a nobody. He was just a young shepherd boy, but that didn't stop him from having faith in God. In fact, later on, when David was about to face the giant, he said these famous words, "You come against me with sword and spear and shield, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have insulted. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead body of the Philistine to the birds and beasts of the field." Then Saul gave David his armor, but it was no good. David said, "I'm sorry, this armor is too tight. These shoes are too small for me." So he just took the armor off, left it with the guy, and he went out to meet the giant, Goliath, all by himself. And he had just 5 smooth stones in his bag and his sling. Now, some people might think David was crazy. I mean, he was just a young shepherd boy. And here he was going out to fight a giant, a well-trained warrior who was 9 feet tall, covered with armor, had a spear like a lance, had a sword at his side. And David thought to himself, how could I ever win this battle? But David said, "I don't need fancy shoes or fancy armor. I don't need spears or swords or even slings. All I need is God. I just need to trust in the Lord." And so as David approached the giant, Goliath yelled and screamed and cursed and hollered, and he hurled his spear at David. But David dodged out of the way. And when Goliath came in close to try to jab David with his sword, David reached in his bag, pulled out a stone, put it in his sling, and made a quick flick of the wrist. And that stone hit the giant right between the eyes. And you know what happened? The giant, who was so proud and boastful and arrogant and seemed invincible, he fell down dead. Can you imagine the look on everyone's faces as they watched this young shepherd boy defeat a giant all by himself? Damas said, "As surely as the Lord lives, who delivered me from the hand of the Philistine, I will show you something even greater." And he killed the giant and took his armor. That was one trophy. But he also killed another giant in his lifetime. His name was Ishbi-Benob. He was over 6 feet tall, and he had a spear like a weaver's organ, which was over 10 feet long. Now, imagine what David must have been thinking as he prepared to fight that second giant. Here he was, facing a giant again, and this one was taller than Goliath, and his spear was more than twice the length of David's entire body. What was David gonna do? How could he possibly defeat such a big, bad guy? Well, David knew he had to do something fast because the giant was coming at him with his long spear, stabbing and poking. So David ran toward him. Some people might think that's crazy, but David knew that if he stood still, he would get stabbed. So he started running back and forth, moving this way and that way, dodging the giant's spear. And then, when he had a chance, David reached in his bag, pulled out a stone, and hit the giant right behind the ear, and that was enough to knock him out. And then David ran over and cut off the giant's head with one of the giant's own swords. Why am I telling you this story today? Well, maybe you're facing a giant today. Maybe there's something standing in your way, blocking your path, keeping you from getting to the promised land God has for you. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's doubt. Maybe it's discouragement. Maybe it's a bad habit, like maybe pornography or gambling or drinking, or maybe it's a wrong relationship. Whatever your giant is, remember, Jesus wants to help you defeat it. In fact, Jesus spoke about giants in the Bible. He said, "This kind only comes out by fasting and prayer." So, step no. 1. Pray about it. Ask God to help you. Step no. 2. Believe that God will deliver you. Step no. 3. Obey God's voice. Follow His directions. And friend, you can do it because Jesus has already given you everything you need to defeat your giants. So don't be afraid. Don't shrink back. Don't give up. Run to God. Trust in God. And like David, shout from the top of the mountain, "I will do it. I will defeat my giant. I will not quit. I will not give up. As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me from the hand of my enemies, I will do it." I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel so we can send you a notification every time we come out with a new video. Our channel is where we share faith-building videos that inspire people all over the world. Be sure to give us a thumbs up. That really helps us out. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.